I can walk out my back door right now in the wrong month and come back in with supper. That's not luck. That's a piece of ground that's been worked 140 years by people who knew things about dirt that never once got written down. Pa broke this ground behind a mule. Ma and my grandmother made it feed us. Between them, they could look at a patch of weeds and tell you what the soil was short of, plant a crop off a blooming tree instead of a calendar, and put up enough out of a half-acre to carry a family clean through the spring. Here's the twist. Number 12 is a poison they mixed right there in the kitchen that could kill the gardener as dead as a bug. Number 24 tells you exactly when to plant, with no calendar and no almanac at all. And number 1 is a handful of seed worth more than the whole garden it came out of. Let's count down 25 Appalachian gardening tricks Grandma never wrote down. Number 25, reading the ground with your hand. Before you ever put a seed in, you find out if the ground's ready, and you do it by feel. Pa would go out early of a spring and take up a handful of dirt from about 4 inches down, close his fist on it hard, then open it. If it packed into a wet ball that held its shape and left mud on his palm, the ground was too cold and too wet, and he walked away. If it broke apart when he poked it, crumbled like a good biscuit, it was ready. Work wet ground, and you don't just make mud, you smear it into clods that bake into brick all summer and choke the roots. Corn wants that dirt near 50 degrees to come up quick. Plant into cold mud, and half your seed rots before it ever sprouts. Number 24, planting by the dogwood, not the calendar. Now here's one people get wrong, so let me be plain. This is not planting by the signs of the moon. This is reading the plants themselves. When the dogwood's in full bloom, the nights have quit dropping below 50, and it's safe to set out your tomatoes and your tender things. When the oak leaf gets to the size of a squirrel's ear, the ground's warm enough to plant corn. The tree and the corn are both answering the same thing, which is the warmth in the ground. So the tree's a living thermometer, stuck in the same dirt your seed's going in. It beats a date on a calendar every year, because a calendar doesn't know it's a cold spring. The failure is trusting the almanac over the window. A warm February will fool you, and a late frost will take everything you set out too soon. Number 23, the three sisters. The oldest planting there is up here, older than any white man on this mountain. Corn, beans, and squash, all in one hill. You plant the corn first and let it get 4 or 5 inches up. Then you plant your pole beans right at the base of it, and they climb the corn stalk instead of you cutting poles. Around the whole thing you plant squash or a pumpkin, and those big rough leaves shade the ground and keep the weeds and the dry out. And the beans do a thing nobody up here could have explained. They take nitrogen out of the very air and put it in the soil, which is the one thing corn's the hungriest for. I'll be honest, most of that nitrogen comes free to next year's crop after the bean roots rot. So it's a long game. But 3 crops off one hill, holding each other up, is arithmetic no single row can match. Number 22, cutting the seed potato. You don't plant a whole potato, you cut it, and there's a right way. Every piece you plant has to carry at least one eye, better 2. That eye is where the sprout comes from, and a chunk with no eye just rots in the ground and feeds nothing. You want each piece about the size of a hen egg, so it's got enough in it to feed that sprout till the roots take hold. Now here's the part folks skip and pay for. After you cut them, you lay the pieces out in the air a couple of days and let the cut side dry over and heal, form a little skin. Plant a fresh, wet cut straight into cold ground, and it'll rot near every time. Ma cut her seed potatoes on the porch and left them lay while she waited on the ground to warm, and she planted the peelings worth and got barrels back. Number 21, wood ashes back on the garden. Nothing got wasted on a mountain place, and the ashes out of the cook stove and the fireplace went right back on the ground. But not the way people think. and I want to be careful here. This isn't the ash you leached for lye. This is dry wood ash, worked into sour ground, because it's got potash in it, the potassium a plant needs to fruit, and it sweetens acid soil about like lime does. But hear me, this is the one where the old-timers could do harm. Ash is strong and it works fast, and you can shove your soil too alkaline before you know it, past where anything will grow. The old rule was a light hand, no more than a coffee can or two to a big bed a year, and only where the ground's already sour. Dump a bucket of ashes in one spot and you'll burn a briar patch. Nothing comes up in for 2 years. A ring of dry ash around a young plant will also turn a cutworm or a slug. They won't cross it dry. Number 20, brushing the peas. Peas and pole beans want to climb, and before there was such a thing as a store trellis, there was the brush pile. When you pruned the orchard or cut a little scrub, you saved the brushy limbs, 4 or 5 feet long, plenty of twiggy fingers on them, and you stuck them in a row right when you planted your peas. The pea sends out its little tendrils, catches the twigs, and climbs itself, with no tying and no work from you. Off the ground like that, the peas dry quick after a rain and don't rot, and you can see to pick them. The failure is waiting too long to set the brush. You put it in after the peas are sprawling, and you'll break half of them trying to lift the vines onto it. You set the brush the day you plant, and the peas find it on their own. That's the planting handled. From here, it's how they kept the garden alive to a mountain summer, and how they poisoned it, and a couple of things that mattered more than all the rest. If this is the kind of thing worth keeping, subscribe. I put one of these up every few days. Number 19, hilling. You don't leave potatoes and corn setting flat in a row. You run dirt up around them as they grow, what we call hilling. On potatoes, it's the whole game. The potato forms up on the stem above the seed piece, so the more stem you cover with loose dirt, the more potatoes you get. And any potato that pokes up and sees daylight turns green and bitter and'll make you sick. That green is a poison, and you never eat it. So you hill them up 6-8 inches over a couple of weeks. On corn, running dirt up the stalk gives it brace roots and keeps a hard rain and a hard wind from laying the whole row flat. Hill too early or bury the little plant and you'll smother it. So you wait till it's a good hand high and only ever cover the stem, never the leaves. Number 18, the manure pile and why it has to rot. The garden ran on what came out of the barn, and hauling and turning that manure pile was my job as a boy, wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow. But you never ever put fresh manure straight on a growing plant, and this is where people hurt their garden, meaning to help it. Fresh manure is so hot with ammonia and salt, it'll burn a plant's roots right up and kill it. So you pile it and let it rot down, 6 months, a year, till it's dark and crumbly and quit smelling like the barn. Then it's the best thing going. There's a health rule too, and it's a real one. Raw manure goes on the ground at least 4 months, 120 days, before you harvest anything that touches the soil, your greens and roots. Rotted right, it turned this red clay into ground you could sink your arm in. Number 17, mulch, putting the ground to bed. Bare dirt between the rows in July's a mistake, and Ma never allowed it. She'd lay down whatever there was, old straw, spoiled hay, leaves raked and saved from a fall, even newspaper under it, 3-4 inches thick right up the rows. That blanket does 3 things at once. It holds the moisture in so the ground don't dry to powder in a dry spell. It keeps the weeds from ever coming up because a seed under 4 inches of straw can't reach the light, and it keeps the dirt cool and even around the roots. The one place you're careful is right against the stem of the plant. Pile wet mulch smack against the tomato stalk and you've made a home for rot and slugs. So you leave a little collar of open dirt around each one. Number 16, onions, garlic, and a marigold in a row. The old women didn't plant everything in its own tidy patch. They mixed it up on purpose. Onions and garlic went in scattered among the other crops because that sharp sulfur smell they carry confuses and turns off a lot of the bugs that would have found the beans or the greens by scent. Same with marigolds tucked in here and there. Now I'll be straight with you. This isn't the wall, and anybody who tells you a marigold is a fence against every bug is selling something. It's one more thing tipped in your favor, not a cure. But a garden planted all mixed, a little of this next to a little of that, never gets hit as hard as a big solid block of one crop, because a bug that eats only beans has to hunt for every plant instead of walking down a whole buffet. Ma's garden looked like a jumble, and it was a jumble, and it was on purpose. Number 15, the scarecrow, and better than a scarecrow. Crows will pull up a whole row of sprouting corn in a morning, taking the seed right off the root, and keeping them off was a boy's job. The scarecrow's the one everybody knows, and I'll tell you the truth about it. A crow is smart, and a scarecrow that never moves fools him for about a week. Then he sets on its head. So the old people did better. They strung twine between stakes over the row so it hummed and jerked in the wind. They hung strips of tin and bright rag that flashed and clattered, and the surest thing of all, they'd shoot one crow and hang him up in the field, because crows will not work a field where one of their own is dead. The trick with any of it is you move it, change it every few days, or the birds wise up. Number 14, watering the root, not the leaf, and never at noon. When it did turn dry, how you watered mattered as much as whether you did. You water the ground at the root, and you do it in the evening or the early morning, never the middle of a hot day. 2 reasons, and they're both real. Water sitting on the leaves in the hot sun scalds them, and worse, wet leaves overnight and standing damp is exactly how blight and mildew get a hold and take your tomatoes and your beans. And a good deep soak at the root once that runs the water down where the roots follow it deep beats a little sprinkle every day that only wets the top inch and keeps the roots up shallow where the sun can cook them. About an inch of water a week, all at once, down low of an evening. Number 13, a little at a time, succession planting. Here's the thing that separates somebody who's got a garden from somebody who's got a mess of one thing all at once. You don't plant your whole row of beans or lettuce or corn in one day. You plant a short row, and then 2 weeks later, another short row, and 2 weeks after that, another. That way it comes in a little at a time, steady, all season, instead of 40 pounds of beans ready in 1 week that you can't eat or put up fast enough, and then nothing. Plant it all the same day, and you get a flood and then a famine, and half the flood goes to waste on the vine. A little and often is the whole secret of eating out of a garden for 6 months instead of 3 weeks. Now the one that could kid you, and after it, the ones that took the most knowing. Number 12, the poisons they mixed in the kitchen. This is the one I have to stop and warn you on, because the old way here was flat dangerous, and folks did it anyway. When the bugs got bad, a mountain family made their own poison, and the mildest of it was tobacco. You'd soak tobacco leaves or stems in a bucket of water till it went brown as tea, and you'd sprinkle that on your plants to kill the bugs. And it worked, because what's in it is nicotine, and nicotine is a nerve poison. The trouble is, it doesn't know the difference between a bug and the man spraying it. It soaks right through your skin, and people got sick handling it. And it got worse than that. From the 1860s on, folks dusted their potatoes with Paris green to kill the potato beetle, and that was near half arsenic. After that came lead arsenate, first used in 1892, sprayed on orchards for 40 years. Arsenic and lead don't break down. They're still in the dirt of some old orchards to this day. So here's the modern word, and you take it over the old one. Do not make tobacco spray, and do not go near the old arsenic dust. If you've got bad bugs, you pick them off by hand, you cover the young plants with a light cloth, or you use a plain insecticidal soap made for it. The old-timers were fighting the same bugs you are. They just didn't know the cure could be worse than the pest. Number 11, sowing a crop just to plow it under. This one looks like madness till you understand it. You plant a whole crop with no intention of eating a bite of it. Then you plow it right back into the ground. It's called a cover crop or green manure. Come fall, when a bed came empty, the old people sowed it thick in winter rye or crimson clover, so the ground was never left bare over winter to wash and blow away. Then in the spring, 2-3 weeks before planting, they turned the whole green mess under. It rots down into the soil and feeds it. And if it's clover, it does that same magic the beans do. Pulls nitrogen out of the air and leaves it in the ground for the crop that's coming. The catch is timing. Turn rye under too late, too green, and too tall, and it ties the ground up so your seed won't sprout for weeks. You give it a couple weeks to rot before you plant. Number 10, never the same thing in the same spot. The old gardeners moved their crops around the garden year to year, and it wasn't fussiness, it was survival. You don't plant tomatoes where the tomatoes were last year, nor potatoes where potatoes stood, nor the cabbage kin twice in a row on the same ground. Two things happen if you do. The bug and the disease that lives on that one crop is already in that dirt, waiting, and you've served it breakfast in bed. And every crop takes its own particular feed out of the soil. So plant it in the same spot over and over, and you starve that ground of the one thing that crop lives on. Move it. This bed's tomatoes go where the beans were, and so on around. And the pests lose the trail, and the soil gets a rest and a different feed. A 3 or 4 year turn around the garden was how they kept the same ground, producing for lifetimes without a bag of anything from a store. Number 9, the hotbed, a garden a month ahead. Here's a clever one that used the barn's heat to cheat the calendar. Weeks before it was warm enough to plant a thing, the old people dug a pit, filled it a couple feet deep with fresh horse manure, packed it, and put a good foot of soil on top and a window sash of old glass over it, tilted to the sun. That fresh manure, the very stuff that'll burn a grown plant, rots and throws real heat, enough to keep a bed warm as spring in the middle of a cold March. And under that glass you started your tomato and cabbage plants 4-6 weeks before your neighbor could. The one danger is it comes on too hot at the start, hot enough to cook a seed. So you wait a few days for that first fury to settle before you ever plant in it. A hotbed put fresh vegetables on the table when everybody else was still eating out of jars. Number 8, the second garden, planting for the fall. Most people quit the garden by August, and the old people were just getting a second wind. When the early crops came out and left a bed bare in the heat of late summer, they planted it again. Turnips, mustard, kale, collards, the hardy greens, for a whole second harvest in the cool of fall. And here's the part that's near lost. Those greens taste better after a frost, not worse. A hard frost turns the plant's starch to sugar to keep from freezing, and it sweetens the greens right up. You count the days that crop needs to make. Count back from your first hard frost, and that's when you sow. Miss the window, plant too late, and the frost catches 'em too little to eat. Done right, a mountain family was pulling fresh greens out of the garden in November when the whole world looked dead. Number 7, thinning, pulling the good to save the best. This is the hardest thing in the whole garden to make yourself do, and skipping it is the commonest mistake there is. When your seeds come up, they come up thick, a whole crowd of little healthy plants, and you have to go down the row and pull most of them out. Not the sick ones, the good ones, till the ones left have room. Carrots want a couple inches between them. Corn near a foot. It goes against everything in you to pull up a fine little plant and throw it down. But if you don't, they choke each other. A crowded row of carrots makes nothing but tops and little stringy roots no bigger than a nail, because they're all fighting for the same bite of dirt and the same drink of water. Crowded plants feed each other's failure. Thin 'em hard and mean, and the few you leave grow big enough to feed you. Number 6, when the frost comes early. Every mountain gardener has looked at a clear, still evening in the fall, with the tomatoes still coming, and felt that bite in the air. There's things you do. Before dark, while the ground's still holding a day's heat, you cover everything you can with old sheets, feed sacks, a bucket over each hill, anything to trap that warmth against the plant through the night, and you pull it off in the morning. If there's time, you water the ground good beforehand, because wet soil holds heat far better than dry and gives it back all night. And an old trick was a smudge, a low, smoky little fire on the upwind side, because the smoke lays a blanket over the patch and holds the heat down. The mistake is bare plastic laid right on the leaves. Where it touches, it freezes worse, not better. A cloth that traps ground heat is what saves them, and it'll buy you 2 or 3 more weeks of a garden. Number 5, pinching the tomato. A tomato left to its own will run all over the ground in a wild tangle and rot half its fruit in the dirt. The old people kept it in hand. Where a branch meets the main stalk, there's a little shoot comes out of the crotch, the sucker, and you pinch those out with your fingers while they're small, and you tie the plant up to a stake as it climbs. 2 reasons. You want the plant's strength going into fruit, not into 100 running vines. And staked up off the ground with the air moving through it, the leaves dry quick, and you head off the blight that lays a tomato low. The failure is stripping it too hard in the heat of summer. Take off too many leaves and the sun scalds the fruit right on the vine, gives it a gray, leathery burn. The last 4 are the ones that took a lifetime to learn, and the one at the end was worth the whole garden. Number 4, keeping the critters out. A garden is a free supper laid out for every animal on the mountain, and the old people fought them constant. The groundhog worst of all, then the rabbit, the coon in the corn, the deer. Now there's 100 folk cures, and here's where I've got to be honest with you. They hung hair from the barber, they scattered blood meal, they shaved soap, they set out anything with a man's scent, and every one of those works for about a week, till the animal figures out nothing's coming of it and walks right past. They're worth doing, rotated, changed up, to buy time. But the only thing that ever truly kept a groundhog out of Ma's beans was a fence, and a fence he couldn't dig under, sunk a foot or more into the ground, and bent out at the bottom. Because a groundhog's answer to a fence is to go beneath it. Everything else buys you a week. The dug-in fence is what works. Number 3, the hoe. Kept sharp, kept moving. This one sounds too plain to make the list, and it's near the most important thing there is. The garden had to be weeded, and old women did it with a sharp hoe every morning, while the weeds were nothing but threads. That's the whole secret. You don't wait till the weeds are up and stout and rooted. You go down the rows at daylight, before the heat, and you scuffle that sharp hoe just under the surface and cut off 1,000 weeds you can barely see before they ever take hold. A weed you kill as a thread costs you nothing. A weed you let stand a week is stealing the water and the feed out of the ground your crop needed, and pulling it up tears your crop's roots besides. But past the tool, it was the being there. Ma was in that garden every single morning of the growing year, before breakfast, in the cool, with that hoe, and that faithfulness, that showing up every day, whether it needed it or not, is the real reason the ground fed us. The last woman on our creek who kept the garden that way, that clean, every dawn, has been in the ground herself 30 years. Her rows put mine to shame yet. Number 2, reading the weeds. Before there was a soil test, the old people read the ground by what came up wild in it, and there's real truth in it and some tale, so I'll give you both. Where sheep sorrel took over, that little sour red-stemmed weed, they knew the ground was sour, acid, and worn thin, and they were right. Sorrel does favor acid, poor soil. Other weeds told them ground was packed hard, or rich and damp. Now the honest part. There's not much hard science under most of it, and any one weed can fool you. A plant grows where its seed landed, as much as where the soil suits it. So a mountain woman read her weeds the way she read the sky, as a good hint, not gospel. She saw the sorrel come in, and she knew to throw the wood ash and the lime to that corner. She was reading a real signal. She just couldn't have told you the chemistry of it, and she didn't need to. Number 1, the seed that learned your ground. Number 1 is the thing the whole garden was really about, and it's a handful of seed. Every fall, the old people saved their own seed, but not off just any plant and not off any old store variety. Here's the 2 things they knew in their hands that most people have plain lost. First, you save seed only from an open pollinated plant, an old heirloom kind, never from a hybrid, because seed off a hybrid won't come back true. It scatters into a mess of poor throwbacks the next year. Second, and this is a deep one, you save from your best, the healthiest plant, the one that bore the most, stood the drought, never got the blight, and you do that every year off the survivors of your own ground, and the seed slowly becomes something that belongs to your holler and nowhere else on earth. The bean my grandmother grew came down through 4 generations of that. Every year it was a little more suited to this exact ridge, this soil, this weather, because every year the plants that couldn't take it were never saved from. That's the part that's gone, and it's the whole of it, not the growing. Anybody can buy a packet and grow a bean. What's gone is a seed that a family made over 100 years to fit one piece of ground, a living thing, handed down a fistful at a time, that carried the whole memory of every summer it ever survived. My grandmother kept hers in a jar on the shelf, and she'd have gone hungry before she'd have eaten the last of it. She knew what it was. It was 100 years of her people, and you cannot buy that back once it's eaten. Here's my challenge. Pick one, just one. Go out and squeeze a handful of your own dirt and learn what it's telling you. Plant a short row of something and another 2 weeks behind it and eat fresh twice as long. Or find one open pollinated plant this year and save its seed for the next. And then tell me down in the comments, what did your people grow and what county was the garden in? Did your grandmother save her own seed? And does anybody in your family still have it? Somebody out there is holding the last jar of a bean that took 100 years to make, and I want to know whose hands it's in. That's the thing about all of it. A garden like that wasn't a hobby, and it wasn't quaint. It was a family feeding itself off a knowledge that never got written down, a whole science of dirt and seed and season, closing down one grandmother at a time. One thing before I go, and I'll only say it the once. Everything I know, everything on this channel, I'm putting in a book, sourced the way we do it here, every claim with where it comes from, so it's written down and checkable before the last of us takes it into the ground. If you want it, it's at EzraCade.com. That's the only time you'll hear me say it. They knew, now it's written down.